One thing we all have exactly the same amount of is time. The main question is, how do you wield it? Working with many tech executives, what we often have to work on is the skill of time management. Are you serving your calendar or are you being served by it? Today, let's talk about some options for you to start taking more control of your time and how to best use it, how to decide what you should be doing instead of whatever you just happen to be doing every day because your calendar told you to. This is one of the fundamental skills for anyone doing knowledge work. I talked a lot about this in my first book, The Tech Executive Operating System, and a lot of the examples are from there. But in general, if you want to read more about this, there's also the relatively new book by Cal Newport, Slow Productivity, which also is essentially in sync about the approach. And now let's talk about how to use your time. But let's start first with realizing that our time is unique because it's not as if you can save it away. You cannot store unused time to be used later. And therefore, our calendars and our day-to-day have this unique attribute where there's no vacuum. If you don't plan to do anything, you're going to be doing something. And anyway, even if that something is just scrolling Facebook, you're going to be doing something. So it is crucial to start with this mindset of, I need to choose how I spend my time, not just see whether I've got time to do X or Y, but decide to be in control of it. And if you have this concept of being more proactive with your time, with the calendar, and starting by thinking, what should an ideal week look like? You'll start moving more towards being in control. Yes, you're going to have weeks where you're going to have to put out a lot of fires, weeks where you're traveling, weeks where there are a lot of things that you didn't plan for and you have to just make do. That's fine. But if you have in your mind that ideal week, you're more likely to eventually at least get closer to it with time as you're working on improving yourself and as you're being more and more mindful of how you're letting your time go. Now, if you're like me, I really track my time. Right now, I've got a time tracker saying I'm working on this content, and I look at that from time to time to see how I'm spending my time. But you don't have to go that far. All I'm asking you to do is to be mindful of how you're using your time. And today, in this at least primer in how to start making more use of our time, let's talk about a few activities that I'd like you to start doing more of or just introduce if you're not doing them at all. Because I think each one of these activities is crucial into being an effective tech executive. Number one is probably the oddest, and that's leadership blocks. That's deciding to have dedicated time for you to focus on your leadership, to not just be in meetings, to be doing something concrete for others, but take the time to think, to retrospect. Your teams are probably taking the time to review their work, to have retrospectives, to give each other feedback, to do code reviews. But as a leader, you don't usually have anyone else doing this for you. It is up to you to take the time to think, process what's on your mind, how you've been dealing things lately, if there are any repeating things that you see that maybe need to be addressed, if you feel like there's a specific gap you need to work on, maybe you want to work on your own skills, maybe you want to read up on some sort of area, or you want to put in some time to do some strategy thinking, to review the things you've accomplished over the past year, think about what you want to be doing in the next months. I've talked about coaching and setting personal goals for you and your people, and we're going to talk about coaching in a second a bit more, but for you yourself, these leadership blocks are about making the time to be a leader, not being reactive, not going to where your calendar told you, but actively deciding and thinking, what do I want to do next? What do I value? So leadership blocks. You can start from something as simple as 20 minutes of uninterrupted time, no phones, no screens, and you can take it from there. Ideally, I would suggest having a 1 hour block once or twice a week, so you get used to this concept of being mindful and thinking and trying to be on top of things and thinking ahead about what's coming up instead of, again, being in reactive mode. Second, probably one of the most important skills in your day-to-day that you're not doing enough of is coaching. If you're looking at your day-to-day, if you're looking at your calendar, you might have some one-on-ones, which we're going to expand on in a second. But in general, how much actual coaching are you doing? How much are you actually helping your people become better? And the role of every leader, I think, is to help their people grow. Your product is the team, the organization. So helping the people become better is making the entire thing better. Because, yeah, you might be measured at the end of the day by the results the team is achieving, but your growth of the team, the coaching of the people in the team, all of those will help to ensure that the results are better or faster. So you're working on the acceleration of the organization, and what they're doing is the velocity. And you need to be doing this coaching. And when I talk to people, usually they don't even think about spending time into coaching unless there's a burning issue and they're like, yeah, I have to be with that person helping them with X and Y. But no, I want to make you think about coaching as in how many hours a week should I be working with my people, be it in mindful one-on-ones where I prepare the feedback in advance and I try to think about the next things that they can do, and we set goals and I try and give them some tasks to help them. I try to talk to other people and see what others are thinking about how they're improving. All of this is actual work. I know I coach executives, but you need to be doing this inside your organization. You need to be spending the time to think about this if you want to ensure that your people grow the most. And if it's not in your calendar, if you're not thinking about when am I going to be coaching, you're probably not going to be coaching all that much or really well, you know? And then let's talk about one-on-ones. You already have one-on-ones, you already have a bunch of meetings, but I want to ensure that the one-on-ones you're doing are giving you enough value, not just the people you're talking to. So for example, are you having enough skip-level one-on-ones and one-on-ones with your peers and colleagues outside of your organization to ensure that you maintain these very important relationships, that you hear things not just from your direct reports, but also from people throughout the organization, so you can see whether we've got, for example, some communication issues, things that you say trickle down, like a game of telephone in a way that no longer has the context connected to it. So people down below in the organization don't really understand why you're doing certain things. If that's the case, that's important to know. If you're talking to your colleagues enough, you'll be able to see if there are opportunities to cooperate, see if there's any real innovation relevant that you can do. And I've talked about innovation in a different video, so I'm not going to go into that, but innovation is a crucial thing that is a lot more likely to happen if we have these one-on-ones and these relationships maintained, because we're essentially lubricating the serendipity required. So decide about your one-on-ones and how you're going to expand it to give you personally more value, not just to the people you're coaching and working with one-on-one, your direct reports, to have a wider perspective and understand what's going on throughout your organization and also throughout the company. Another thing that I like to have my clients do from time to time, and the time frame here really changes between the companies and between periods where you're more busy or less, and that's management by wandering around, management by walking around. These are concepts from management books from the 70s, I think, but they hold up. And that's the concept of not just doing management when you're in meetings with people, but actually, walking a bit in the office and seeing what other people are doing. If it's on Zoom, it's harder, and I detail in my book a bunch of different ways to do it, even in remote or hybrid locations, such as, lurking in Slack channels and stuff like that. But the concept is that you also need to be there and see what's going around, because if you're only waiting to see what people tell you in meetings, you're going to lose out on a lot of context. And my favorite example is, I know if I see a huddle of engineers debugging something, I know that there's an issue. And if I notice that happening too much, I can start thinking, well, maybe we're having some quality issues that the engineers take care of really, really quickly, but how about finding the root cause? Or if I notice that there's such an engineer that always seems to be around looking for help, maybe that person needs help and their manager is dropping the ball there. Or instead, if I see that there's a specific senior engineer that's always running around helping everyone, we might have a hero. And as much as I appreciate those people, I don't want to have heroes in the team. I want to have people who help others grow and share the knowledge instead of just giving it whenever needed. So management by walking around, spend a bit of your time being outside of things, just, being in the moment, seeing what people are doing, and not in an intimidating way of the boss is watching you. Another would be product mastery, which I've talked a lot about, and it's in all of my books and in all of my podcast episodes. So check those out if you want to learn more about product mastery. But at the root of it, the kernel is about the product mastery is we understand the product, the business, the users. So are you spending some time maintaining your connection to the product, seeing the demos, seeing what clients are saying, seeing what feedback your salespeople are getting in sales calls, so you know whether the latest features you're working on are actually moving the needle or not, seeing what the competition is doing, seeing what the regulation is probably going to do as things change with new administrations and whatever. All of those are important contexts, and you're not supposed to do all of that by yourself. Yeah, there are product people in the company, but having that connection will make you an invaluable leader in the company. I've seen that happen so many times, and I've seen the vast difference between those who didn't possess that and essentially became order takers. When you don't have the context, you can't poke, you can't ask the right questions, you're just waiting to be told what to do. So don't be there. Work on your product mastery. And lastly, you need to be mindful about how you move upstream. Moving upstream is about becoming more as an executive in the company. So are you spending enough time talking to your peers, being in the board meetings, working on the strategy with the CEO, understanding what's happening at that level of the company? Because if you're not, then again, you're not going to be a tech executive. Even if you hold a C-level title, in a startup, everyone's a C something. No, I want you to be a real executive. And that means that you make the time for yourself to think about things that are at that level and go to those meetings and inject yourself and elbow your way into those meetings so you have a seat around the table where the strategy is being discussed, where we're deciding about the roadmap, where we're reviewing what the company is doing. At first, to gain the context and start listening to things if you're new to this, and then to actually help shape that. Again, this is something that we're usually, reflexively, many people from a tech background think, I don't belong there or I don't have the time for that. But if you look at the ROI, those hours are probably going to give you and the company the most benefit. So try and put more time there, less time being still the person who remembers how we set up that specific microservice 3 years ago because you were one of the first engineers. That's cool, but that's no longer the case. And that's no longer what's important. So decide from all of these, what are the 1 or 2 activities you want to start be doing more of, like 30 minutes a week? Start adding up and being in charge of your time. Think of what the ideal week would look like and start moving towards that. Not every week is going to be ideal. Mostly probably are not. But if you have that in mind, you're going to see some improvement very, very quickly, which is what I usually see. And I'm going to link somewhere on screen or in the description to a video about coaching so you can be better and start working on your coaching, because I think that's one of the most important skills, as I said. And if you decide on that as your one thing you're going to start improving on in your time management, well, I'm going to give you a leg up there. Thank you.